Hi, Peter Charles here, and I'm going to talk to you today about using a very light line to cast a very heavy high drag fly. Now, conventional wisdom tells us that we need a Skagit head to do this job, and it's true, a Skagit head will do it wonderfully. But I'm out here with a very, very light line. In fact, this is a single hand line that I've got here, and I'm going to spey cast a very heavy fly and get a reasonable distance out of it. So let's take a look at what I'm going to be using here. Okay, let's start off by looking at the fly. This is one of my Lake Erie flies that I use for smallmouth bass, and I fish it on a full sinker 15 foot down. It's got a big cone head, it's got some heavy lead wraps underneath on the hook shank, it's got a rabbit strip wing, a really thick big body, a hackle at the front, some rubber legs. It's a really high drag heavy fly, and in fact this thing is so heavy you could probably cast it on a spinning rod. It's cold out today, so instead of swinging this fly or stripping it, I'm going to hang it under a bobber and dead drift it with a bit of swing at the end. So I've got this big corky on here. I've also, my nymphing leader here is about 9-10 foot long, and it's quite thin. I mean, this butt section is only 15 pound. It's a very, very long, thin leader to be casting such a heavy fly. Now let's look at the line. This is an 8-weight airflow bass musky taper. It's a single hand overhead line. This thing is not designed for spey casting. It has a very short front taper, and compared to spey lines it's very, very light. Yet I'm going to use this line to spey cast this big bobber and that big heavy fly, and I'm going to get a respectable distance, maybe 40-50 feet or thereabouts. And finally, the rod I'm using, it's a Loomis Pro 4X 10.5 foot 5-weight switch. It's not a very big rod, so I don't even have the advantage of using a long rod to cast this line. So let's get suited up and see how this works out.
Now, what I'm doing to be able to cast this big heavy fly in that bobber, that sort of distance with this light line, is basically three things. I'm keeping the anchor fairly far away from me. As a consequence of keeping the anchor far away from me, as I begin my cast, I pull the anchor towards me. I get the rod tip up high, and I make a long forward cast, and I do it without stopping. And the important part is not to have the fly stop. If the fly stops while you're making a forward stroke, you will not get it going again. The momentum of this very light line will not be able to move that fly. And this is what Skagit does. It has the momentum and the power in the line to be able to move a fly even when it stops. When you have a light line, you cannot do that. You have to keep that fly moving. And that's very important. This light line cannot overcome the inertia of this heavy high drag fly. I've got less than 30 feet of fly line out, so I'm under 200 grains here for the total length of the fly line. And yet I'm able to move this line and shoot a bit too while I'm doing it. Okay, let's see what happens when I do it wrong. I'll put the anchor close to me, I'll make a pause, and I'll make a short stroke cast, and we'll see what happens. Flop. As you can see, it just folded up in front of me. Now all they need is a fish.
Well, had a great day today. Caught 3 bass. Can't complain. Now, was the rig I was using ideal? Of course not. I wouldn't recommend that as a normal setup, but I was proving a point. You can fish a high drag heavy fly with a very light line and spey cast it and get it out there a fishable distance. Of course, I wouldn't recommend that people try that as a normal way of fishing, but it is possible. You can do it. Conventional wisdom says you can't, but really you can. It just takes some simple technique, and the important thing is to keep that fly moving during the forward stroke. Don't let it stop. If the fly stops, so does the cast. Anyway, you can see it's possible, it works, and if you had to do it, you can. Anyway, so get out there and have some fun.